independent MPs are calling for GST to be part of major tax reform. Joining me live is independent member for Wentworth, Allegra Spender. Allegra, thanks so much for your time. Let's talk about this proposal and you, along with the other Teal MPs, have put on the table today. What exactly do you want here?
Look, what I want is the tax system to work for the economy and the Australian people. And I think there are two really important issues with the tax system at the moment. One is about fairness, which is, are we supporting young people and future young Australians appropriately so that we have an intergenerational fairness? And the second is productivity, because our productivity is falling off a cliff. And I think that if we don't do something, and tax is part of the solution, then we have significant issues. So I'm calling for tax reform, and I'm leading my own tax reform process, really. We're engaging the business community, leading experts like Ken Henry and Ross Garno, as well as the social sector, unions and environmental community, because I think tax is a really important issue, and it's an issue that we as a country, the major parties, frankly, are not brave enough to have a conversation about. And so that's why I'm starting that conversation. Okay,
so what is this conversation central to? Is it GST? Do you want to increase the GST? By how much? And do you want to broaden the base to what?
So what I've said is I'm going through a process at the moment, and my goal is actually to bring different parts of the community together and see where the consensus is, starting with those experts, but businesses and also social sector people. So for me, I don't have yet a position on what I think GST should be, but I think that we should not rule GST out when we're looking at tax reform. We need to bring everything into a conversation about tax reform, because, where we have failed in the past is because we rule things out, and there's a lot of ruling things and ruling out, which particularly the media love, but it's actually not very good for long-term reform. And I want to explain why I think this is important. I had a young man in my office just the other week, and he said to me, look, he said, I finished uni last year. Said, I've got a $50,000 HECS debt. I'm starting working. I feel like I've made the right choices, but I don't see any way for me to have sort of secure housing to ever own my own home. And the truth is that, 40 years ago, if he'd made those choices, he'd be set on a great path. But right now, having made those choices, he doesn't have a path way to, sort of home ownership and wealth. And frankly, younger Australians, younger generations are going backwards relative to other generations. And that's only going to get worse unless we actually intervene in the tax system. And that's why I'm really advocating for intervention.
Okay, let's stick on GST for a moment, though. I know you're not ruling anything in or out, but, if you were to increase or broaden the base of the GST, it couldn't just be done in isolation. One, the GST revenue, every single cent goes to the states for a start. So there would have to be reform around that. I mean, if you're increasing the GST, you'd have to change the whole arrangement as it is now. Would you agree? And there'd have to be some clawing back of health and hospital and education spending, wouldn't there?
So what I'm saying is I agree with you that we need tax reform, and, just increasing taxes, that's not tax reform. I'm actually saying, look, if we hold the tax base the same, but actually change the mix, what could that do in terms of productivity and into fairness? And those are things I think are really important in setting up for the future. So you're absolutely, so I think you're absolutely right. If any sort of tax reform should be a part of a package, because, I'm not trying to raise a single tax. I'm trying to make the tax system better so that it delivers better growth in our economy, better productivity, and is fairer for different generations. And that brings our country together so we share in our prosperity and that we're well set up for the future. Because the intergenerational report that was released last week says if we do nothing, our income taxes, the tax on working people, will go from 50% of our tax take, which is already record highs, to 58% of our tax take. At the same time, we have fewer and fewer workers, because in 2000 there were 5 working age people for every older Australian. Now there are about 4. In 20 years' time there'll be 3. So I just don't think it's possible that we can rely more and more and more on working Australians to sort of be paying high income taxes.
Yeah, I think we'll all agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So that's why I think we need to reform, and that's why I think GST has to be on the agenda as well as one of those taxes to contemplate, because, it's a big tax system and GST is an important part of it.
Okay, you've said be brave, so here's a question for you. Would you change the GST arrangement for WA? Are they getting too much?
Look, I think there's. I'm honestly saying I'm trying to change the tax system. I don't want to pick a fight today with the WA.
That doesn't sound very brave.
Premier. No, because I'm actually trying to build consensus first off, Laura, and that's what I'm actually trying to do. Is like, I don't. I say this to every single interview. I'm not here to rule out, say this is got to be the right tax system right yet, because we have to get together, and that's why I'm getting eminent economists, the BCA, the Property Council, but the union, social sector, get them all together in the room and say, where can we go from this? Because great reform in the past has been about building consensus. The Hawke Keating, the Howard Costello, the work that they did was about building a coalition of people around what is important reform for the country. And I think, that's what I'm seeking to do, because I think the major parties, are not addressing this, and they should be.
Okay, Allegra Spender, we'll see you soon.